We can start over from the beginning then.
Yeah, now it should be okay now.
So MarkusY is our moderator and our resident bass player, and you missed one bass joke because we are starting again. So MarkusY is going to Vegas in about 2 weeks.
Yes, hello. So yes, I'm going to Vegas with Jones here from MarkusY Mania. He won a package there and asked me to join with him. So of course I'm going to join him and going to stay 1 week there and hopefully have a good time there.
So you are playing one VSOP event and some else live poker as well.
Yes, I'm planning on playing poker every day there and sold some action of one event, VSOP event, and looking forward to that.
That's
Usually,
great.
I don't usually like to take shots to bigger tournaments, but this is a really special case, so I decided to play a bit bigger event.
Yeah, I think that's something that's at least interesting because I think you got the accommodations
Yes,
for a
yes,
for a good price, and then it's going to be a trip, and usually for most people the VSOP is something to experience at least once in a lifetime. So
yes, and we're staying at MGM Grand, which is a huge hotel, so it's pretty cool.
it should be pretty cool. But today we are going to go through some online games.
Yes.
So what games do you play nowadays?
Nowadays, I have been playing poker for 6 or 7 years, and last 3 years I have been playing MTTs, and at the moment I'm playing. I think my average buy-in is somewhere around $15. So
So you are playing mid stakes to low stakes games mostly.
yes,
And
the
Caleon asks that how big a buy-in is it?
it's a $1,000 tournament. I sold 70% of the action, so
So effectively, it's a $300 tournament for you.
yes.
Still, it's going to be quite a big one.
Yes, it's a lot bigger than I have been used to playing, but
But so you are one of our moderators, and you have also, if I can show here one of your blog posts
yes,
on the Finnish sites. So you did an account to 888 Poker, and I think we can start with the 888 Poker hands. And you did the account on, I think it was late November or
yes,
something like that, and your profits exceeded $10,000 with an average buy-in of $9 only in just 5 months or 6 months.
yes, I won some flips.
So you are one that will recommend that 888 Poker is a good place if you are playing MTTs.
Yes, definitely, it's my main site at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that today we are going to do like there is like two parts for this session. There are, first of all, there is going to be some interesting hands that we are going to look through on some different sites, and then there will be one final table. So there is a final table. This is a poker. This is from Coral Poker, I think, the
Yes,
iPoker network.
yes, it's actually from this morning, so it's really fresh.
That's always good. Like you are, you are also one good example that you have now today. I think you have posted 2 trophies from 2 wins at MTTs, and then you are at the evening you are taking coaching. So like 2 trophies per day is not enough.
Yeah. Well, I have a early wake up tomorrow, so can't play at the evening, so need to have something to do.
Yeah. So we are we are trying to start with some of these hands, and we can see that there are some hands that are from January, so not everything is as fresh as the
Yeah,
final table.
yes, I usually, well, I'm trying to go through the hands always after I have played the session, but since there are some hands from January, I don't think I have always done that, so.
It's okay because I think that we all wanna go through hands quickly, but then when the hands arrive, then it's always going to be a bit harder. And there should be like, I think that these might be quite nasty ones when you said that these are going to be the hands that you have marked. So let's see that what we are having here.
And these are all post-flop hands because this is post-flop is my main focus at the moment because I think I can play pretty decent pre-flop game, so I have I have focused on my post-flop game lately.
This is interesting. Like I had a HUD that actually I think that in these games it's the HUD is pretty useless because we are having one hand there and one hand here.
That's actually fun. I can see familiar player there on my left. I didn't notice him before, but
Yeah, we are having Korpisoturi here, who is our coach, so. And you are from the same city of Riihimäki.
yes,
And because this hand has a jack, this is an impossible hand to play well.
yeah,
I think that when the effective stacks are under 30 or 30s, then usually it doesn't make much sense to go higher than a min raise.
yeah,
But I don't think that 900 or 800. That's about what color should we paint the fence.
yes.
And we are having an interesting pot coming up. There's the small blind took part of it. And small blind checks. We are having top pair, top kicker. There's a flush draw on the board.
Yes, see, betting this about half of the pot I think is good here.
Yeah, I think so too, because this is going to be quite a dry board. So
Yes,
I think C betting should be the standard line, and we are doing it for value for sure. I actually like in here if we are having, like, I think the general 888 poker opponents are going to be calling a bit too much, so I think we are going to punish them if we are betting a bit bigger.
yes, that's a bit small bet there. I think I would bet something like 1.4 here usually.
I think that's quite good. And Eulos process that half a pot seems to be way too big of a sizing for your range. I think that if you are thinking about being completely balanced and something like going with the game theory or going for a pseudo GTO line, then it's. But I think in these games it's more about exploiting the general opponents. And Calleon said that 1K would be my default here. And actually that's what I'm pretty much getting at, that if I'm having a player that's on 888 poker, I'm generally thinking that they are going to be a bit more fishier than general. What do you think? That is this a guy that you know?
No, it's not a familiar Nix.
And we are having a flush draw coming through, and opponent still checks. What do you think about the situation here?
Well, I might pot control it a bit here, so might check hit this one.
I'm still thinking that I'm thinking that there is probably still value in betting against a general opponent, even though the flush draw comes through. But pot controlling, if you are in general, if you are having a really fishy table, then pot controlling makes some sense because then you are, especially when you are against the larger stack player. But in general, I'm still trying in a mode of trying to extract the maximum value out of this situation. I think in general it comes from carrying on betting in here.
Yeah, like Galeon said, I think bet fold or then check are the options here, and
Yeah, and there is also going to be that if there is one more diamond coming up, then you are pretty much screwed. But in here, and as Kauris said it the first, that we are going to bet fold here, and I think that's going to be quite fine because I think that people are going to raise fives, and they are going to also raise flushes. So I'm thinking that this checking is going to be, I think it's going to be too careful, and
yeah.
there is value that we can extract. On the river, our opponent bets. What do you think about the situation here?
Well, just calling this. It's not. It's really hard to think what we are beating here when he bets, but I would just call this, getting a good price. Maybe some weaker jack hands.
I think that there are still hands that you bet because when you are checking the turn, I think that there are opponents that are also quite likely to carry on with a complete, or are trying to steal the pot with complete air as well, if they are having something like overcards or like, I think there are even unpaired hands that are going to bet here, and
Yes.
Eulos Project might even go for three streets actually, and there are like some floats, weaker jacks, sometimes weaker pockets, and definitely just call. That's also something that I see no value at all of raising here, and that's something that we didn't even discuss.
Yes, but yeah.
And this is pretty much what I expect. And I think this is, in a way, this is a funny spot because I think that opponents, even bad opponents, are going to bet quite polarized there with their overcards and missed hands, and also some nutty hands.
Yeah.
And just as Caleon says, that I also see a lot of ace-x bet in these spots. That's definitely something that I'm seeing as well. And this is going to be more of a sit and go player. I think I have a quite good idea on the general tendencies, but there might be some changes that I'm not completely aware of, or some different type of game flow in 888. And Eulos Pro, yeah, not raising but folding is absurd too.
Yes, definitely not folding there, but
Yeah. And in here, nine deuce suited. I think in general this is an excellent spot to steal, especially if there are antes in play. Without antes, we could actually fold this. Like,
yes. Against these unknown players, I think these are unknown players. I think I open pretty much every hand there.
yeah, with antes it's better, but I think the average players are you probably know the players better, but I think that we can fold the worst hands even on the button.
Yeah.
And we get 3-bet with a really small sizing. What do you think about the situation here?
Well, we are getting a really good price, and it's a suited hand, but I don't like the situation. But I think we can call this.
We can call this, and the stacks are deep enough that we can. I don't think that our equity is that good, but we are at least beating the pot odds with the equity we are having because we are only requiring about 21%, and our stack is deep enough that I think we can in position, we can realize our equity quite nicely in here. And as it's suited, like if this is something like king deuce off, I think then we are more likely to fold, because then we are going to play worse against the opponent's general hand, and we are more guessing. But even though the price is really good, like I know that the mate you are going to Vegas with said on one of the Finnish coachings said that we are getting such a great price that we can pay even with a dead hand, but I think that's going a bit too far. So we are hitting the top pair. Our opponent bets 40% to us. What do we do?
I was about to say that this should be a pretty easy hand to play post flop, but this is type of flop where we call here.
I think calling is going to be the best equity option still,
Yeah.
or in here. There's not a lot that we are afraid of, and when our opponent 3-bets, even though we are opening from button and he's from small blind, I still think that he's not going to hit that flop that often.
Yeah, and there are some backdoor draws too, so.
And there's Yulas process that he's just happy that MarkusY plays loose on the button, so I'm not going to complain about that. And I think that 40% is probably going to be quite tight, but this is like top or bottom 15% of the hands. So I'm thinking that without antes, opening something like 60 to 70% would probably be around optimal against the general players. But if you are really good in post flop and you are having stack depth like we are having here, then I'm thinking that even opening any two might be profitable. But in general, especially if you are multi-tabling a lot, I think that going for a tighter range is going to generally be better, I think. And we are calling the flop. On the turn, we are getting a flush draw opening to us. Our opponent carries on betting but increases his sizing to 60%. What do we do here?
I'm still calling here.
I think that when we are starting to play these kind of hands, we'll need to have the balls to call.
Yeah.
And Yulospro said that should be mentioned that he shouldn't hit this flop too often, but needs to be considered that his 3-bet was way too small for a competent player, so he might have anything, and therefore we shouldn't expect such things. I think that even the players that are not competent, they are going to have some kind of a method to their madness. And in general, I think that it's going to be a lot more likely for them to have a high card hand or a pocket pair here. And Yulos Pro said that just kind of go from oops top 15% range to top pair is nuts versus him. I'm not sure that I understood what Yulos Pro meant here. But I agree here that we need to be calling even if overcards hit, and the suited jack is probably one of the better overcards. That now there is a lot more that a general player will hit with his 3-betting, but still that we are also getting really solid outs from the jack, because I think that if we are getting a flush here, we are going to win this pot a lot. And on the river, we are getting another jack. And yeah, Yulos Pro said that sure high card hands are more likely, but his range might include hands like King 5 that he's gonna overplay sometimes, etc. Yep. And Calleon also remarked that we are pretty close of getting direct pot odds for the flush draw. But I think in here when we are having the like on the flop top pair, we are going to have so much extra equity that we don't even require the flush draw that often. And on the river, the flush draw that's open on the flop also completed. And let's see what our opponent does here. Our opponent checks. What do we do here and
It,
why?
we just check behind and hope we have the best hand.
Yeah, I think that betting here wouldn't be good because then we might need to either play for our whole stack or fold showdown value still, and we are having quite a solid showdown value hand here. And checking this, I think that something like 60% of the time, I think we are winning this hand when our opponent checks the river. And there's the king queen off. I'd have to say that I'm not the least bit surprised. And this is quite of a boring session thus far that we have agreed for pretty much, except the one check, that's probably the one. And in here we are having quite a deep stack. And we are starting with 2.5x raise. Yeah, because of this stack size, I think it's going to be good. And Calleon asks if Villain bets half a pot on the river.
Well, he's really polarized there if he bets, so uh, depends on the day.
I don't actually know that if Villain is that polarized if he bets the river there. If you think he's polarized, then I think that with the medium strength hand like 9 deuce off, it makes a lot of sense to call. I tend to think that when opponent goes for 3 streets of betting in general, if they are unknown, I'm thinking that they are more likely that they are having a good hand.
Well, yeah, actually that's true because he, like his pre-flop play wasn't that solid, so I don't think he's capable of. Well, maybe something like Ace King, he might like think it's the nuts or something like that,
I think that in
but
here, when the villain bets half a pot, then it's a harder decision point that if villain bets a pot here, then I think it's going to be quite an easy fold
yeah.
on the river, even though we are having that much showdown value. But if a villain goes for 3 streets and bets the pot on the river, I'm thinking that in general I have seen such a good hands on the villains with those kind of lines. And Yulos processed that it's pretty hard for him to have air there. Usually people don't bluff enough there, even though their starting range is wide. I agree with Yulos Pro on that. But let's go to the next hand. Ace Queen off. And we are starting at 2.5x open. I think this is going to be standard, but when we are going to post flop, then it's going to start to change. We hit top pair, top kicker. What do we do here?
See, betting this as value, I think half a pot.
Yeah,
Maybe actually could bet even a bit less than half a pot.
yeah. I think here, if we are betting 500 to 600, I think it's going to be good. We want to keep both of these guys in if we just can. But the Metalman bets for 666 chips. And we get 2 calls. We get 2 calls, and I think deuce is going to be it's not going to be an important card, but how do we carry on?
Um, when they both call, well, we have a now we have a gadget also and top pair and top kicker. I think I'm just going to bet the second barrel here.
What's the sizing if we are betting the second barrel here?
Well, if we bet here, I think we're committed, so would bet pretty big. I think something like 1.8 or something like that.
And Kauris84 says that when 666 is a nice bet, then the next bet is 1666. That wouldn't be bad, actually. I think that in here there's like two different options to go for a bet of something like when we are doing an exploiting bet here, it's something like 1200, and let's try to show these guys that they are having fold equity still. Or 10 just trying to extract the maximum value out of opponent's calling, and then it's about 1.8.
And Gallon asks about checking, and that's actually option 2.
I'm actually thinking that when it's a three-way pot, I'm thinking that it's probably better to still bet. And checking is an option, but I don't think that we are achieving a lot with checking.
I think the only thing we are achieving here, if they both, if there's a bet and a call, then we must think that what are we beating.
Yeah, I think that checking would be better in this situation if we would be in this Fu and Kulas place in here. I think then we are trying to fish for one bet after. And the fact that you are committed after your bet shouldn't factor too much. If your hand is good enough to bet, just bet small enough to get called by a wider range. And as I said, that if we are betting small on the turn, then we are also going to get raised sometimes with a weaker hand that thinks that they are having fold equity still. And it's not that I wanna bet this because it's a three-way pot. I think I wanna bet this because I'm thinking that we are getting on average, we are getting more value for our hand if we are betting this. And it's not going to be that likely that opponents are going to bet if we check when we have had like check and then call on the flop. I don't think it's going to be then that likely that our opponents are going to call, especially when on pre-flop they have just called. But when we are checking, we get a bet from I will win. And Fo and Kule PL also calls. Now what do we do here?
That's a bit tough spot because we opened UTG and they're really showing some strength there, but I think we can call and check the river.
Yeah, I think that this starts to be a quite of a nasty spot also in the regards that actually when you open for 375 with those guys with about 4,000 chip stacks, it doesn't make that much sense for the opponents to be here with a set mine. And if it doesn't make that much sense for the opponents to be here with a set mine, then what kind of a strong hands can our opponents have here? And especially that both of our opponents would have strong hands.
Yeah, it's really hard to say when they are unknown players.
I'm actually thinking in here that this Foenkule is probably having the stronger hand when he's interested in calling. But I still think that it's just too hard for me to, when I'm thinking from pre-flop on, too hard for me to think about ranges that would hit this flop better. There might be something like 4-5 off or pocket 4s or pocket 5s for this Foenkule, but for this I will win. There just isn't that many hands that would make sense, but against an unknown opponent, they might have a weaker queen here as well. I think that we are giving too much respect here, even though it's like, if we are thinking this street in isolation, then I think that, like, what do we beat? But if we are starting from pre-flop on and trying to get through the ranges, like, I can't get for this guy, I don't think that there are a lot of strong hands that would make sense. And for this guy, a set might make sense, even 4-5 suited, but there should be plenty of other hands as well. And Calleon says that other one has aces, definitely. Let's see, because this should always end up in a... Like, this guy may also have a flush draw on the turn as well, but I don't think that he has a hand that beats ace-queen on the turn. We didn't see what our opponents had there. It's quite interesting to see that he bets the turn and then he folds to a river bet when he gets 23% pot odds. It's interesting, for sure. And there also Julospro said that in small tournaments, this is like $24 games, so it's still low stakes. And I think, like, if I'm comparing the games that I remember from 888 poker, I think like the $20 games are there probably at the same level than $3 to $5 games on PokerStars. I think the difference in skill is quite big in between the sites. This is going to be a horrible hand for me when I'm seeing that there are going to be 100 big blind stacks. So I'm getting out of my comfort zone for sure in here. What do you like to do on pre-flop?
I think I'll just check here and play it post-flop.
Yeah, I think it's going to be probably the best option when there are four players included and we don't have the advantage of position. If this would be that we are, like, there are being hijack and cutoff have limped and we are on the bottom, I think then the situation is a bit different. But without position, I like the... Okay, we hit the top pair and we are having a good kicker. What do we do on the flop?
I would bet about half a pot here, so there's a lot of bad turn cards that will come, so I think betting here is good.
I'm not sure that do I agree with you in here about betting. Like, when it's a limped pot, then it's going to be that it's not that likely that our opponents will bet if we are checking here. But I don't think that there are that many horrible turn cards. And I'm just thinking about what do we get value from, and do we get value owned often if we are leading here.
I think it's more like a old-fashioned info bet also.
And you lost pro suggest and Calleon both suggest that betting 300 chips on the flop bar. Because we are betting so rare here that we wanna bet bigger. I could actually agree with that if we are going to bet here, and also if we are going to bet here, then also when we are betting bigger, bigger it also discourages our opponents to play their draws. So half a pot in here is going to be half a pot here in here is going to be an old-fashioned info bet more. On the turn we are getting another jack and trip to Vegas. That's a funny nickname for today's team, but we'll see. What do we do when on the turn here?
I would bet something like 600, 6 to 700 maybe here.
I'd agree with you here. I would like to have a bet here again. Again, when we are betting the flop. So, and this is going to be about the half pot bet sizing, and I think in general in MTTs and in tournament poker in general that if you don't know what to bet, usually if you are betting half a pot, you are not making a big mistake. So and trip to Vegas still calls. On the river we are having practical nuts. What do we do here?
Well, trying to get some value out of it. Maybe something like 900 or something like that might get called from something like ace high or maybe 9.
I would actually like to see a really big bet on this river in general. Like if we are having an unknown here, I would go for something like 1900. Because like there is like nobody falls a 9 here. And there are also going to be aces and stuff that are going to get harder to fold. And I think that in general people are going to, in these kind of situations where the absolute hand strength is going to be quite good, like nobody ever folds a full house even though they should. But I think that in these situations people are going to call too much, and they are going to call too much against the nuts here. And when we are having the nuts, I think it's going to be easier to bet big here. We are betting 1000 chips. It has been the same from the start to finish that we are betting half the pot, and we didn't get a call here. And Caleon says, actually there is a good question on Caleon that when we bet here, what if we get raised on the turn?
Just calling if gets raised here.
Yeah, I think so too. We are going to have such a strong hand. It might also be that if we are going to get against the Holden R with that kind of a stack size, then it depends also on the raise size. That do we want to get it in? And Kauris, that doesn't fly anymore. Pocket tens. This is going to be the neighbor of the hand that's impossible to play well. So we are starting with a bet here. And this is very, very deep. This is like 200 big blinds deep.
Yeah, we are calling this 3-bet when we're with such a deep stack, so.
Yeah, we can even call this for just the set mining odds. So we are going to have a huge situation here. So what do we do on this flop, and we'll see what our opponent does first. Our opponent bets big into us.
Well, we can call this 1-bet at least and then re-evaluate on the turn.
Yeah, I think it's going to be too weak to be folding pocket tens. And Calleon says that it's easier to play than jacks, and now it would be actually easier to play jacks than pocket tens here.
Yeah.
Our opponent checks. What do we do here?
Checking behind here.
Yeah, I don't see much point in turning the hand into a bluff, and I hope you didn't either. And as Calleon said, that call only is it's the only real option on flop. I agree. Opponent checks the river. What do we do?
Check behind.
Yeah, this is again one situation that I don't think that we can extract much value, if any.
I'm not actually sure why I have marked this hand because it seems pretty easy to play here. So.
I think it's always when you are like discussing about a hand, then it might seem a lot easier than it has seemed on the table.
Yeah.
And Kauris said the check fold, and I don't think that like folding tens would be an option at any point of that hand. Like if we are with only one overcard and the overcard is a jack, if we are folding pocket tens, I don't think it's going to be that good. And then Eulos Pro says that the river should be bet for value, and Calleon says it as well. And Kauris, if we are in position, we can't check call. So I'm actually still unsure that how much or how often do we get value from ace highs here. But actually, if we are betting small here, it could be good. And as Eulos Pro said that he's got ace high always. I think that he will have ace high a decent amount of time. There are not a lot of hands in his range that is going to beat us that he plays this way, that he checks the turn and the river. So actually going for a small value betting on the river would make sense here.
Yeah.
But I think it's still going to be quite close with checking, so. And I think a bit interesting when you are so deep that an opponent chose to 3-bet ace-9 off. That's not going to be a value hand in any sort, and it's not going to play well when you are so deep. So ace-9 off. What do we do here?
Calling this.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good defend. Even though the general cutoff opponent is probably going to raise with a quite.
Yeah, it's only 100 to.
Yeah, and with these pot odds, even if we are against 25% range, that would probably be about the average for the population. With those pot odds, we are going to get good situations happening with ace-9. And it's going to be a fine hand to 3-bet bluff as well in this spot. And if you are like, this is now ace-9 in this spot, and on the previous hand, when it was 200 big blinds deep, I don't know which hand does Eulos Pro mean, but I think in here when the stack size are lower, it's going to make more sense. And Eulos Pro doesn't think that it would be close at all. That should we bet the river on the previous hand or check? Might be that I'm completely lost there. That it's going to be way better to bet And okay. On the flop with the 4-7 queen, what do we do with the ace-9 off? What's our plan for the hand?
Well, um, actually, into that type of board, I could also check raise this hand, not because of my hand, but because he hits. I don't think he hits the queen so often, so I could turn this hand into a bluff also, or I could call, or I could fold. They are all options.
So this is actually going to be a situation where it depends a lot of this kind. We don't have the stats here. Actually, now I
Yeah.
think that for these hands it would probably make more sense of going these through on your computer rather than mine when I don't have any stats here. So we are checking. And with ace-9, I think that checking is going to be... It's going to be good, and in here it depends on how aggressive the opponent is. I'm
If
thinking the standard would be check fold with ace-9 off.
Yeah, well, if he's really aggressive and is c-betting a lot, in those type of boards, I really often check raise as a bluff. But
That's another option. But then he needs to be really aggressive.
yes, against an unknown, I would fold. And
I think I think the standard line would be still to check fold. And we check raised. Yeah, this is in a sense this is going to be a nasty situation because we are going to look through the most of these hands in a vacuum here, as we don't have the stats.
okay, I'm not sure why it's I. This might be one of those hands I have accidentally marked, but yeah, I would pretty often against an aggressive player, I would play it like that because I'm calling so wide on pre-flop that I usually I check raise a lot as a bluff in these type of boards.
In general, if the population is c-betting way too much, then it's a good way to abuse the tendency to check raise. Then it's going to be a good way to abuse the tendency to c-bet too much. And I think most of the regs are going to c-bet quite widely, so it might be pretty good to check raise a lot of boards against those kind of players. This going to be all of the These are going to be all of the hands from the 888 poker, and I'm going to watch the clock a bit here as well. And we have gone through, I think, a few hands here, and oh well. And this is the best part for me when playing MTTs, 5 minutes to something. Yeah, the 5 minutes break, it's if you are playing MTTs and you are playing a long set, you are going to appreciate those breaks a ton. A ton. But if they are going to be the first 1 or 2 breaks, you are not going to. They are not going to be that fun. Let's disable the HUD when it gives us practically nothing at all, so let's disable it for that reason. This is going to be a 6-max tournament. And we are having one opponent to raising from the button, then we are getting a call from the small blind, and we are on the big blind with 9-8 off. What do we do here?
Calling here.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty standard spot to call. Queen, king, queen board. First opponent checks, What do we do here?
Check and fold.
Yeah, check fold should be pretty. I think check fold should be pretty standard. In a three-way pot, I wouldn't often turn this kind of a hand into a bluff. I don't think that we are going to. I don't think that we are going to get folds often enough. Of course, this is one of those almost zero equity hands because if we are behind, there are almost no hands that we can hit to be ahead, and so we are not folding a lot of equity if we are bet folding this. But in general, I just don't think that we are going to get enough folds.
Yeah, that's a bit weird play.
Well, this is like this time we got folds, but in general, I don't think that we are getting enough folds,
Yeah,
especially with a king and a queen, because I think that it's going to be so likely that one of the opponents is going to hit something or even have something, even have some kind of a draw here
yeah,
to go with their hand. So I didn't like the bet on the flop.
yeah. I wouldn't usually play it like that.
And Eulos Pro says that never don't bet in this spot and you are fine.
I won't do it again.
And I'm wondering here, just to disagree with Eulos Pro on something, because that's something that we don't do often enough. I'm just wondering there that actually I think that if we are not donk betting there, it makes a lot of sense because then we are getting the turn to the original better. So if we are having a value hand, we should like that our opponent is betting there anyway. So yeah, I'd say that don't donk bet there. We don't get the bot often enough with our complete air bluffs, and when we are having a really good hand, we are probably getting more value if we are getting the turn for the original raiser. And Joel H asks for the 9-8 hand. How about the squeeze here?
Squeeze is an option. Yeah, it's a good option, but I think I would rather call this because it is, even though it's offsuit, it is connecting. It's pretty easy to play post flop. So
Yeah, this is in a way, I think that if we are betting or if we are squeezing here, we are going to turn the hand completely into a bluff, and with this kind of pot odds, having a connected hand, I don't mind seeing a flop, and I actually prefer seeing a flop with this kind of a hand rather than getting it pre-flop. So I don't think that squeezing would be the best option there. I'm thinking that calling is mostly better. So we are carrying on in the vacuum and thinking about general situations. And Euros Pro said the squeeze is always an option when small blind flats button open if neither of them is a total fish. Yeah, I think that it's going to be a better option with a different kind of a hand. When we are having a hand that isn't gaining a lot on the flop. Of course, 9-8 offsuit isn't also that often, but well, onwards to the next hand. Ace-3 off. We are facing a min raise from the small blind.
calling this.
Yeah, in general, when there are antes in play and there's 9 players playing the antes, there are not a lot of hands that you should fold on the big blind. Especially if this guy is a reg, then there is practically very, very few hands to fold, if any.
Yeah, I think I would 3-bet really polarized here and call with this type of hands.
Generally, with something like ace-3 off, I don't mind also 3-betting these kind of a hands because we are really rarely having a solid flop hit. So on the flop, we are generally we are having high card equity, that we are having like, if we are ahead, we are usually ahead, that we are having better high on the flop. So, and it's going to take us into situations that we are finding ourselves in harder situations. So I don't mind 3-betting those kind of hands and calling with hands that play better in general. But I agree with you that in that spot, in general we are going to bet pretty polarized. Kaleon asked, would you just call king-3 off, queen-3 or off type of hands, or prefer to 3-bet bluff?
Those type of hands I would 3-bet bluff.
But ace-3 off is kind of a nasty in a way that it's not that strong and it doesn't hit flops that well either. And okay, on the flop we are having king, king, queen. We are getting led into with a large sizing. What should we do here?
Well, the options are call or fold. I'm not really sure which is better here.
This is one of those situations in a way that, as I said earlier on, that with something like ace-3 off, usually we are having high card equity. If we are ahead of our opponent, usually we are getting ourselves into these kind of situations that in general we are having enough equity to call at least one bet, but we are not going to, we don't want to go all the way. This is one of those situations that it depends a lot on how much our opponent is raising on the small blind. If he's an aggressive reg that raises 70 to 80%, I find this very, very hard to fold. But if he's a random player that raises 25 to 40%, then I'm thinking that this is probably better to fold.
Yeah.
But actually, I think it's hard to say in general about how often does a general player, or what kind of a range does a general player play. Probably kind of on the tighter range when, but. And I'd agree also that, of course, it again depends on like what kind of a range does our opponent see bet here. That does it make any sense to raise here as a bluff? But when we are having ace-3 off, we are still having so much showdown equity that it's probably better to just think about calling or folding. On the turn, we are hitting the ace. What do we do on the turn? So our opponent checks.
Checking here.
Yeah, I think that if we are betting for value, we are either doing it on the turn or the river, and if our opponent checks on the river, then it's going to be easy to bet for value against general queen or something like that. And now it isn't that easy to bet for value against a queen anymore. Our opponent still checks. What do we do here?
Checking behind.
Yeah, I think so. This is one of those situations that, like, I think most other cards we are going to, if our opponent checks the river, we are going to bet for value. But queen is probably one of those cards that we shouldn't.
Yeah.
But I think in this case it's also like if our opponent hasn't hit the flop at all, I don't think that they are calling that much with a guaranteed split door. So I don't think that's going to be that often. So, and this is something that probably shows that our opponent is opening 70-ish percentage.
Yeah.
And in a way, there's Callion says that no value really in the river, and I would bet the river like 3, 4, 5. Yeah, if you are betting the river, then I think the bet should be pretty small. And not for, I don't think it's going to be for balance reasons, but I think it's for the reasons that if it's going to be small, then bad players are more apt to call the small bet on the river for the split. And let's go towards the next hand. It's interesting to see that the replayer always tries to re-enable the HUD when it changes from 9 max to 6 max. Pocket jacks. Impossible hand to play perfectly. What do we do here?
I would raise here for something like 800.
I think standard would be to, when there's limper, to raise to 750. But 800 is fine as well. We are getting one caller and we are getting two callers. So now the poker gods that make playing jacks impossible are doing their work and making this a three-way hand. And there's actually a really good point on You Lost Pro, that if people are not calling a lot for splits, and if there is not a lot of value to bet for splits, then to exploit that, You Lost Pro would like to bluff a lot, and then betting seems fine. That's actually also like, and if you are going to bet a lot, then I think a smaller sizing would also, because then you are going to get a good price on your bluffs, and also when you are having the value hands, then you are going to get called slightly more often. And Danita said that we have played the pot pretty passively, so I think that Villain doesn't put us on made hand that often. That's true as well. The problem in that hand is to be thinking about what does the villain do in splits. I don't think actually, because when villain checks both turn and river, we are practically never beat there. So that's why betting doesn't have a lot of risk either. So I'd say actually that I tend to agree with Eulos Pro now a lot, that betting the river on the pot where with the ace king queen board, it starts to make a lot of sense to bet, and I think to agree that with Eulos Pro now that it's going to be a hand that there's a missed bet on the river, because our risk is not going to be high, even though our reward might not be high either, because we are going to get called rarely, but when we are getting called, it's going to be more chips for us. And the first opponent checks, the second opponent bets really small. What do we do with pocket jacks?
Oh, I think I would just maybe call here.
I think this is one of those nasty spots that you wanna raise this also because the bet size is going to be so small. But then it's also at what we are going to, what are we afraid of, and what do we want our opponents to do here?
It's like if we raise here and he has something like nines and re-raises, and then it's a hard spot. So
It's a hard spot, and it's just in this case that we would like to grow the pot, and I think it would be an easier decision to just call if our opponent would bet something like 1,600. So, but like when opponent bets so small that it's going to be hard to get the money in on the river or in this hand when we are thinking about through the river, then I'm thinking about raising as well. And there is Kauris and Joel H are going to say raise. Damn, we really need to have some kind of a button that I can press here to start a poll that should we call raise or bet, and have some kind of a place where people can vote that what's the best option. And why do you guys wanna raise? I wanna raise in here because I think that we are going to be ahead majority of the time, and I wanna grow the pot bigger in this point to make it easier to get the money in. That's my reasoning for wanting to raise here, and my reasoning stems from that opponent bets so small here. But I'm thinking that it's going to be like, because of this bet size, as I said, that if opponent bets larger, then it's going to be easier to think just about calling. And I think that calling is going to be, in my opinion, they are going to be pretty close. And Kauris says that pocket jacks is not nuts. Yeah, it's not nuts, but it's going to be, in a six max game, it's going to be pretty good hand, especially on this kind of a flop still. And on the turn, our opponent switches from betting a third of the pot to betting half the pot. What do we do here?
I would call this.
I think right now this is going to be way easier to call. Call like right now I don't think that there is going to be, when we are facing a half a pot bet, then we shouldn't have any problem if we want to get it in on the river. We shouldn't have any problem because then he's going to have 6,000 chips, or we are going to have 6,400 chips left, and the pot is going to be close to 10,000. And Hosser Hero, welcome to the forums. And also Moons on the Twitch chat. We are following the Twitch chat as well, but it doesn't fit our screen, so hello to you too. And Julas Pro said type raise in a heads up, but if this is heads up on the turn and I still think raising is an option, I can do it then. And I think raise is seldom good. I'm also thinking on the flop that on the flop that it's probably going to be a bit of a twisted mind, but it's on the flop, if we are raising, it's going to be heads up more often after that. And I think it's going to be easier from that point on, but if the pot is going to be played easier or not, it shouldn't be a factor. Only factor that would need to matter would be the equity that you are having. And I'm thinking here that calling this would be the, like, I think that on the flop we can go from calling or raising, but on the turn I'm firmly standing that I think calling is going to be a better option here.
Yeah.
And you said it as well that calling is going to be a better option. and then we are seeing a raise here. And Julas Pro, so sorry, I'm saying on the flop that on the flop, I think it's going to be, the pot is going to be easier on the flop if we are making the pot heads up on the flop, but on the turn, I don't see much point in raising. And I really strongly agree with Julas Pro that we want to keep the burst hands in our better's range. If he's having an 8 or pocket 6s or pocket 7s, we want to keep all of those hands in and able to bluff. And there are not a lot of hands on the turn that there are not a lot of river cards that are going to be bad. Like, I'm
Yeah, I
thinking that
agree.
we are going to call, or it's going to be quite easy to call most river cards if it's not going to be on the river that this guy shoves and this guy calls and there's going to be a diamond.
Yeah.
But I think the discussion is very good here on multiple hands, and we can see that there are good players that are having quite a different opinions on the hands. I think in general it's going to be that Julos Pro is probably thinking or playing, probably he's playing tougher games, and probably his ranges are going to be more correct in the pseudo game theory optimal sense. And I think most of the MTT players are playing such fishy games that it's more of an exercise of exploiting the opponents to the maximum than like exploiting the opponent's mistakes because the opponents are making so many mistakes rather than striving to play a balanced play at all spots. But I think that these hands have been pretty good and pretty interesting thus far. And Moon says on the Twitch chat that there's a straw poll that we can do. Yeah, but it's going to be much harder than just going for click something. I know straw poll, and that's really good that you can easily go for straw polls, but I think that I would require another guy here to create straw polls for different situations. Like in poker, usually the polls would be should be bet check or raise here. And this is something that I said to MarkusY that these kind of situations are really nasty, that there are likely ICM effects because we are, and this is super turbo, because the stack sizes start to be this big. This is probably going to be the final table or close to the final table, and then this is going to be a bit of a nasty spot, because if we are having an ICM situation, like we are having an ICM situation and a post-flop situation, I have never seen a good tool to work with ICM and post-flop situations. Usually all the ICM tools are only concerned of pre-flop hands. But generally we are in ICM situations, we can kind of use common sense rather than calculate them out. It's usually good to calculate some of the situations out, but generally we'll know that if we are just winning a ton of chips, it's going to be good. And queen 10 off. What should we do here?
Well, getting great pot odds here, it's a bit nasty because it's an early open, but I think we can call and fold on the flop.
Yeah, I think this was one of those hands that would be in the category of that we are getting such great odds that we can call even if we are close to dead.
Yeah.
With queen ten suited, it would be way easier, but we'll see. And I think this is the nasty part. Nasty part. What do we do on the flop?
Well, check and hope for a two checks behind.
Yeah, and it's even if we are getting one bet, and I think even one bet and a call we can still call. And Caleon asked that is this a final table? I must say that I think that it is, and I think that we can check it also. Can we check it? What are the placements? Oh, we don't have any finishes here. So I don't have the I have only the hand history and not the tournament results, so we can't check if this is but I think like now this is not for you MarkusY, but I think that most of the problems with defending widely for the beginner players are stemming from when they are hitting a top pair, then they are going to start betting even if it's an UTG and UGG plus two caller. But in this kind of a situation, I think we wanna go for a pot control, especially if we are going to be especially if we are going to be in a final table. And as you lost pro says that given that Markus makes so many final tables, this must be. And Kauris says that can you say I don't know one more time? I was going to answer no to that question and then I understood how stupid would it be. And the UTG bets. What do we do here?
Oh, that's the problem with defending with this type of hands against an early position raise, that we are really in a nasty spot here, but I think we can. I'm not sure which is better, folding or calling.
I'm thinking that if we are hitting this solidly and we are having a backdoor flush draw, I think that if our opponent is not a nit, I'm thinking that this would be a hand that would be most better called. And thanks Danita, he added all the stacks together and we are not on the final table because the stacks are not equal. And that's actually a really good tip. And yeah, everybody agrees that this is a call on the flop, so. And even you agreed on the. But this is something that this is not as much sunshine and rainbows as it looks at the first sight. Julos Pro said that big stack with Antes is gonna open like 20% even from UTG, am I right? I think that if he would have been the biggest stack, he could open. And if he would be. Not even if he would be good, but. In general, I think that opening like 20%, it quickly starts to getting worse if there are, like in here, MarkusY is having a stack that's quite easy to re-steal. Klotz is having a re-steal stack. The Leclown is having a stack that he doesn't need to think that much if he's having a nice hand to re-steal. And that's something that I think caps the range of even a large stack opening widely from UTG. And Eulos Pro says that raise would even be better than folding. I'm unsure that would I agree with raising because raising the flop would be practically shoving the flop. And I would like to, if I'm ahead, I would like to have an option for my opponent to bluff and play with the weaker hands later on in the hand. And Kauris says that push turn, and that's going to be something that I don't agree with, even though you are now getting a flush draw. And there's good questions on Joel and Kaleon on why to push turn. What would you do on the turn?
Checking this and calling if he decides to continue.
And I think this is also now going to be a good example that I think that when we are hitting also this, when we are having the backdoor flush draw, it's going to be pretty self-evident on why it's going to be even a better idea to call the flop. Opponent just checks behind. And now that we are on the river, what do you think to do here?
I'm still checking.
Why?
Because I'm scared.
I'm thinking that if an opponent bets the flop and checks the turn, I'm thinking that he shouldn't have a hand that beats you that often. But that's also going to be an interesting situation. That what do you think about, or what do you viewers think about the hand here? This, when we are having a queen, I think that betting the river would have the merits that our opponent very rarely has a better hand, even though our stack size is such that an opponent can opt to check the turn even with a really strong hand, because he's going to have a quite an easy job getting the money in on the river as well. And Kalean says check river. MarkusY says check river. Well, checking the river is also having actually checking the river because we are not in position, and that's something that this is probably one of the moments that Kauris says more coffee, which I should remedy soon. But when we are not in position, actually checking is really good. Really good because then our opponent has an option to bet with the hands that he has missed. And Danita asked how much we are betting on the river if we are betting shove. I think that if we are betting on the river, we want to go for a smaller kind of a sizing and increase the likelihood that our opponent is calling us with a high play. Something like 130 to 150,000. And opponent just checks back. This is actually also interesting to see what kind of a hand does our opponent have in here. Because I think that it doesn't make that much sense to, if he doesn't have any showdown value, then I'm a bit unsure that why does he check here. But we'll see. Well, our opponent had a lot of showdown value here, and one of those hands, he opened one of those hands from UTG that's impossible. impossible to play correctly. And Paavo Pesusieni says that Fukal has often ace-jack, ace-king, jacks, tens, or made flush on a turn in this spot. And actually, I don't remember when we have had this kind of a vibrant discussion the last time on a session. So big thumbs up, both thumbs up for the chat today. And Julospro says that I don't think he c-bets three-way jacks or tens too often. Yeah, I don't think that c-betting jacks or tens there does make that much sense. But I think going for a pot control, especially against the largest stack on the table, would, in my opinion, make a lot more sense. And this is, I think these hands are from the PokerStars French.
Yes, this
So
is
you are
from.
Nightfish 666 there. So
Yeah.
let's see how many hands. There are two more hands. Let's go through the two more hands and then go for a break. And personally, I can easily have king queen or ace queen, especially with spade in Villain's shoes with this line. I agree with that Villain can have a strong hand because of the stack sizes on the that Villain can with those kind of a stack sizes. He isn't obliged to bet a stronger hand there because it's going to be so easy to get more money in or rest of the money in anyways on the river. And in here, we are facing a limp with 5-3 suited. What do we do here?
Uh, well, it's a start of the tournament. I pretty widely raise in these spots with just a deep stack, but checking is also fine. But
Yeah,
they are villains are really, even with these stack sizes, they are limp folding way too much.
yeah, it does make sense to, like, especially with antes. If this would be a game with antes, I would probably raise it to 90 with pretty much any hand because we are having position. Our opponents are limp folding way too much when they are limping. Without antes, I think the bottom hands we can just check behind and get some equity on the flop. And this is going to be one of those nasty spots because chat is lagging something like 30 or 40 seconds behind. So then it's again if it's this hand or previous hand. But I think that we can carry on because there is an option to bet and check. I think both of them are going to be decent options. And as I said that I personally prefer keeping the pot smaller with the worst hands in these spots. And Joel H says that's if a player is a fish, not a reg. And I'm thinking that if I'm seeing with 100 big blind stacks, if I'm seeing a player limp the small blind, I'm going to say that it's going to be like 90% that it's going to be a fish, not a reg.
Yeah, in these first levels, I don't think regs will limp that much.
Yeah, I think regs are going to have quite streamlined, like the ranges are going to be quite simple and streamlined for the early game usually. And we are having the first straight flush draw, and Calleon is already excited about it. It's a straight flush gut shot. So there is one out. Does a man from Riihimäki hit it?
One out is enough.
But we are having almost the nuts, and our opponent bets the pot.
Well, call here is good. I think there's some pretty good implied odds here.
Yeah, there are pretty good implied odds here. There are also some reverse implied odds that you are also going to own yourself against larger flushes.
Yeah.
And Joel H said that c-bet. Our opponent already bet. We can't c-bet if when we are in position and we are not the first one to act here. Opponent bets again, but smaller. What do you think here?
I'm still calling here. Now we got the. Well, yeah. I think I'm still calling.
Yeah, now we got better odds, and we are actually pretty close to getting the correct odds. And Callion also that some regs limp fold like 90%, some regs fold like 20%. I think it's also going to be like if you are having an early game limp fold stat for regs, I'm thinking that there will also be some kind of a sample size problem. And Ulas Pro says that one out is enough is also good stuff to put into one's signature. Yeah, that's SIG material for sure. You should probably also have like a blog with Jones that even when you're playing Chinese poker on the airplane, that what kind of sayings are you going to make through the trip? Because I think that's going to be quite gold.
Yeah.
And we'll see that if the one out is enough. This time we didn't hit the one out, and our opponent bets 30 chips.
Well, that looks really weak, so even raising here is an option, I think.
Yeah, it's an option. I think the weirdest part for me in here is that this is going to be more of being a bit of a fish whisperer. But I think that in general, if an opponent is betting a pot-sized bet on the flop, he's going to have a top pair type of a hand really often. If he lowers it and if he goes for a small bet, it's usually when there is going to be an overcard to his hand that was top pair before. I'm thinking that from that kind of a hand, or that types of hands, it would be pretty hard for get our opponent off. Like I'm thinking that he's having some kind of a showdown value here, and that makes me not likely to bluff.
Yeah, he might
So,
have some missed flush draws also, so.
and there are some missed flush draws, but I think majorly we are going to get called if we raise here.
Yeah, might be.
Let's see.
That's a big sizing, I think. But
Actually, I think that it needs to be at 500 to 600 if we are
okay,
going to raise here. So I'm thinking the sizing is okay. It can be a bit smaller, but I don't think you are completely out of the. And there's a question, or there's a talk about if we raise the flop, we don't want to check turn to get free river usually. I think raising is maybe the best option on the flop. Maybe we barrel on turn. I think the problem in here is also that if we raise the flop and barrel the turn, we are still going to be against quite of a... I think we are still going to be against quite of a tough range when our opponent bets the pot-sized bet on the flop. So, and Jones says, I will never fold on the river, at least wanna see what the opponent has, so call is minimum. Actually, even if opponent is min betting, if we are having 5 high, so it's almost a nut low here. I don't actually like calling. Like, we get some information, but... And it, like, you can say that it's only 30 chips to get information. But still, if we are... Only hand that we are beating is going to be deuce 2. So we are having second nut low here. I wouldn't call the 30 chips ever. And Eulos Pro, like, my point in here is that if on the flop, if opponent bets a pot-sized bet, I think it's generally signaling, when opponents are unknown, it's signaling a way stronger range. Stronger range than a half a pot-sized c-bet, for example. So that's going to be a factor in what I'm going to do and what I'm going to think that my opponent's range is going to be. But on the river, it's going to be pretty interesting that our opponent folds. Yeah, and it's donk bet sizing, so our opponent donk bets for a full pot on the flop. And Eulos Pro would rather call than fold too. You guys, don't you like your chips or do you like information more? Are we starting a trend of info calling? Like info bets are so 1990s. That 2010 is the decade of info calling. Did I hear a pencil writing there for notes there that this is going to be the decade of info calling? And now I'm saying that it's after this hand, it's going to be a break and coffee for me because this is starting to get out of hand. Kannigstafur raises for a 3x raise.
Oh, well, calling this.
Yeah, I think that when there is a call and we are having a king queen suited, I'm thinking that calling is here. It's going to be by far the best option. This is a solid hand and we are going to play well in a multi-way pot, and it's going to be that we are going to see the flop really often if we are just calling here. And we don't mind having more players here. And you lost process that 30 play money chips is cheap for that information. I think in these situations it depends a lot on like how many tables you play. If you are calling and you are playing like 12 or 15 tables at once, I don't think that in general you are going to get that much out of the information. But if you are playing to something like 4 to 6 tables and concentrating really well, then I think that you might get more out of the... And it's nice to have a situation finally that everybody agrees that calling the king queen suited. And now on the flop is monotone and we hit the top pair.
Yes, checking this and hoping for a free turn card.
Free turn card would be the dream. Well, this is as close to free as it gets.
Yes, calling here.
Yeah, I think that in here, even if there would be a normal size bet like half a pot or 1/3 of the pot, I'm still thinking that calling would be good. Actually, when it's a 4-way pot, then it gets to be a bit worse. But I still. And Yulos processed, well, I want to raise in real world situation there too, but rather call than fold when discussing about that. It's interesting in a way because if I'm having a situation that I can't win any chips, then it's going to be like if there is any chips, like with the second nut low, then it's really hard to just call, but then also to raise it because we need to raise fold. I think it's going to be hard. Like there are some kind of principles that I think people are upholding. And Joel H said raise all in and go to blog and write down that you got bad beat on the Jack Queen flop on with the King Queen nuts. And Kaulis84 asked what opponent thinks about with this min bet. Every opponent folds, raise, info bet. I must say that I don't actually know what the opponents. Like, if you are having a 4-way pot and you are min betting, I generally don't know what that means. Like, if you are having complete nuts, when you are min betting, it opens the betting again. But I'm thinking that if you are having a value hand, you are getting more value if you are betting bigger than a min bet. And if this is a professional fish line, I think it's a professional fish line. And now the guy that min bets the flop goes for a full pot. What do we do here?
First we press the time bank button and then we think about it.
Okay, let's go to the time bank. It's clicked.
Yeah.
Now you have all the time in the world to think about it.
Yeah, it's really hard spot. When he bets a pot, I'm actually not sure what I should do here.
This is, in a way, this is nasty. Because I don't think that our opponent will have worse hand than trick queens here. I'm thinking that this is a spot to hero fold. Pretty likely.
Yeah.
And there will be weaker queens, but because you are holding one queen and there is only one queen available, I'm just thinking that there is going to be way too few queens. And when opponent goes to full pot, I'm thinking that he will have a value hand, and when the board pairs, he starts to get scared. So, in general, I think that if you are going to hero fold, this is one of the spots that hero fold is going to be in order. And now I need to ask the chat what's the point in raising all in on the turn? Does MarkusY have an opinion on what to do here?
No, I'm still on
you
my
are
time
still in
bank.
the time bank.
Yeah.
I just think that when opponent goes for a full pot here, he's having the weaker hands will be queens, but there will be just so many more flushes. And Julos Pro says that when he min bets, he tells us that he doesn't know what he's doing. That's actually true as well. And there's actually one key point that he might think that he has a value hand here. So I'm thinking that with queens, people are thinking that they are having a value hand here, but not jacks that often. I'm saying a hero fold would be in effect here, but with trip queens against the fish, it's going to be hard. So Julos Pro and Joel H are going to get more money in. And Julos Pro probably explains on why raise on the turn is getting money in versus villain's range and not willing to play river versus his line. Because sometimes we are folding incorrectly on the river and sometimes we are missing value. And Joel H doesn't like that fold. I actually like that fold because I think that in general there are going to be so few hands. When this is more of a bet sizing kind of thing, that I think that when I have looked through hands where my opponents have bet a full pot in these kind of situations, I'm thinking that there are going to be so many more value hands. And of course there are not going to be many of these situations that it goes from min bet to. And Julos process that sometimes see 8-7 of hearts play like this too. I don't think so. I think that if there is something like a really weak hand, I'm thinking that they are going for a bigger bet on the flop. And Joel H say that we still have full house outs. Yeah, we are having 9 full house outs. But when we are facing a pot-sized bet, our odds are not going to be even close enough. And if we are calling this, we are having only 5,000 chips behind. So we are not having a lot of chips behind if we are hitting the full house. Are you out of your time bank already?
In Riihimäki we have longer time banks. So.
I'm thinking that your time bank has the size of the Uncle Scrooge's money vault. But I don't think that this is an easy situation. I think that in these kind of spots it's usually quite easy to just, I have a good hand, let's go for it. But when good players like Julos Pro and Joel H are thinking about that folding is going to be very bad, then it's going to be a time to think about it. So I think that this is a hero fold, and I think that we are correct in folding this on the turn rather than. And there are actually a lot of good points that Julos Pro and Joel H are taking, that when we are having full house outs, we are having a lot of the time we are having better hand than Villain, that if Villain is having a queen, we are likely having the better hand than him. So yeah, I probably can take a U-turn, that even though I think that we are going to face a flush here really often, and only a small portion of the time we are going to face face a weaker queen or. But I think that opponent is going to be strong almost always. And I think like 10% of his range will be completely random BS. So I'm taking a complete U-turn and saying that I actually start liking going all in here instead of going for a hero fold. Now I'll need to tap the bolt that. Are you getting out of your time bank already?
Yeah, well, this is one of those spots that it's really hard. So I think when we fold this, we still have a good stack here, and we can get the money easier in the future spots.
I'm thinking that this is closer than Joel Age and You Lost Bro. So I'm thinking that there is point in folding sometimes as well, but when I'm thinking about it more, I'm thinking actually that this is probably better to just go for it on the turn. And I think our difference is with Eulos Pro that Eulos Pro thinks that ranges are about 20% of his range. And I'm thinking that with these kind of moves, I'm thinking that there's going to be more like 60 to 70% of flushes, in my opinion. So I think it's pretty much that's going to be the difference between my and Eulos Pro's reasoning, that I'm going to think that opponent is having a way stronger range here. Eulos Pro said that he min-raised pre-UTG. How many flush combinations does he have? He didn't raise pre-UTG, he limped UTG. So let's go to the start. So this guy limped. There's a raise. Then we called the raise and it was a 4-way pot on the flop. Like, my point isn't here about how many flush combinations does he have on the flop, but I'm thinking that when it's going to be a min bet in a 4-way pot and then turn into a pot-sized bet, I'm thinking that that's going to exclude a very large portion of his pre-flop range. And Jones says that let's stop thinking and make a couple of info calls, and we are heading in the showdown, and it will only cost 9,000 chips. But yeah, I think now we are going to take a break. Now I'm waiting that should I yell wake up.
Yeah, I'm still on my time bank.
I'd say click 5 more minutes to your time bank, so this is going to be the break time where your time bank balance is increased by 300 seconds.
Great.
We'll be back in 5 minutes.